Paulie Malgnaggi once said that all the top fighters were Caucasian and stem from the Eastern European region. Well, Jermall Charlo just beat in dominant fashion Charlo-Derevyanchenko. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Make sure you smash the like button. Also, subscribe to my channel for the latest and greatest in boxing. If you want to become part of the gang, notification gang, please hit the bell icon. Shout out to the super chats, channel donations, the Venmo donations, the Cash App, and the Patreon family. We working. I also opened up a Zelle account. Make sure you guys use that link in the description. It does help the channel in a tremendous way. Also, ESPN Plus, the link is in the description. ESPN Plus, we got you covered. There's a ton of archive fights, both boxing and UFC, docuseries, documentaries, BTS, and exclusives. You can get ESPN Plus as a standalone app, or you can bundle it, ESPN Plus, Hulu, and Disney Plus, all three of those apps for one price. And it does help the channel continue to grow so we stay independent and put out more and more content and, you know, just get some new gear and try different things on the channel. Appreciate you guys. Now, I want to talk about this whole Paulie Malgnaggi situation. So as promised, I told you guys I would follow up with this particular subject regarding Paulie Malgnaggi. Paulie Malgnaggi made some insensitive race-related comments, and earlier this year he was canned from SHOWTIME. I told you at that time that I understood where Steven Espinoza's SHOWTIME and the people above Steven Espinoza who, because it doesn't sound like Steven Espinoza, that was his first choice. They were trying to get Paulie Malgnaggi to apologize. But, you know, in the end, I understood why they removed him, because it's 2020 post George Floyd. There's a lot going on in the world in general. Make sure you guys vote. And ultimately, Paulie's comments, not only were they regrettable, they're untrue. You know, it's one thing, everybody wants to drop gems and stuff like that, but literally what he said was not true. And I told you I was going to revisit that, so we didn't forget. Ego's Army, stand up. Make sure you guys smash the like button. And I'm going to refresh you and give you a refresher on what Paulie Malgnaggi said, because some people forgot, but over this side, we don't forget. Paulie Malgnaggi, and it's ironic he was talking about Devin Haney, who has an upcoming fight. Meanwhile, we haven't really heard much from Paulie Malgnaggi. At least me, I haven't seen him or heard him. I've seen him liked a couple of people's Instagram posts, but it looks like things, you had a good job. SHOWTIME has some great fights coming up. Gervonta Tank Davis, they just had the Charlo doubleheader. You know, they got some good fights coming up, and Paulie could be a part of this action, but he pretty much got himself removed from these untrue comments that he said. Now, this is what Paulie Malgnaggi says, quote, "Boxing has had its course in history with certain demographics dominating more than others, right? Maybe like 100 years ago, Irish fighters were better, and then the Jews, and then the Italians came in. I think the I think the African-American fighter became the most dominant in the sport in the 70s, 80s, and even 90s, you know. It's not great to have the race discussion because it's going to coordinate division." And then he says, "I don't know if Devin Haney got the memo. It's no longer the time of the African-American anymore in boxing. It's the Eastern Europeans that have become the dominant species in boxing. I think stating something like what Haney said could be very dangerous." Paulie goes on to say, "I try not to join the race conversations. This is one of the exact examples of why I don't believe there is racial oppression in 2020 or in this century. I believe there has been, sure, but don't believe there is racial oppression today. I believe it's all made up, and I believe that it is exaggerated. This is exactly one of the reasons why. The fact that a black fighter can say that and not pay any price financially, but if a white fighter said that about any black fighter at all, he'd probably lose his TV contract, and probably TV networks wouldn't touch him, you know. I won't tell you that it's a double standard, but I'll tell you that it proves the entire whole hypothesis of racial oppression is exaggerated in this century, you know. I don't think this century has given us anything aside from any situations people want to nitpick," end quote. And ironically enough, Paulie Malgnaggi, he says he doesn't like to join the race conversations, but then he has a race conversation. And he talks about Devin Haney, who made a statement and says, I'll never lose to a white boy. And I assumed he was paying homage to Bernard Hopkins, who previously said that and then lost to white fighters, right? And Devin Haney said this at the time, and this was all in response to that all this stuff came out from Paulie Malgnaggi, or some of it, because it wasn't just this one interview. It was multiple things, a multitude of things said on social media and out in the public space. And the funny thing is, Paulie Malgnaggi says, I don't like to join the race conversations and this, that, and the third. And he says what Devin Haney said could be real dangerous, and it could get him, canned from the networks, or, blackballed from the networks. But ironically enough, that's exactly what happened to Paulie Malgnaggi and not Devin Haney. So it goes to show you who said what and what was truly offensive. Now, if you follow my channel for a while, you know I practice and pride myself on my consistency. And I told you guys at the time when this happened in real time that Paulie Malgnaggi, his take was completely off. It was untrue, things like that. And I said one of the upcoming fights that we'll see if Paulie Malgnaggi's hypothesis or theory about Eastern European fighters being the dominant species and, taking over the globe. And I don't know if Devin Haney got the memo, but it's no longer the time of the African-American fighter. So no wonder Paulie Malgnaggi got fired, because there was a Showtime doubleheader headlined by two African-American fighters, Jermell and Jermall Charlo, who are also brothers from Houston, Texas. And guess what? In that particular fight, they both won their fight, both dangerous fights. Now, I'm not really referring to Jermell Rosario because he wasn't fighting an Eastern European fighter. He was fighting a fighter from the Dominican Republic. But regarding Big Charlo, Jermall Charlo, he in fact did fight a guy from Ukraine, a great fighter coming off a great performance where I thought he beat Triple G. Hand on guys, hand Max. And that was Charlo-Derevyanchenko. So no wonder Paulie Malgnaggi gets fired, because if you watch that fight, what Paulie said was not the truth. If the Eastern European, if you're going to have these general stereotypes, how come one of the first fights that we've seen since he said that, comment, one of these first high profile fights that we've seen, this proved to not be the case, as Jermall Charlo beat and convincingly beat Charlo-Derevyanchenko. He beat him to the punch. He had his eyes looking battered and sunken in. I watched the replay too. In real time, I was like, okay, it was a good fight. But after watching the replay, it was still a fun fight because Derevyanchenko is a warrior and he shows a massive heart. And, he got up here. But upon second viewing, I realized that Derevyanchenko literally got beat just as bad as I seen the first time, if not worse, because there was this one moment in the fight where the Showtime commentators were exaggerating how badly Jermall Charlo was hurt. Now, I was watching it on the show. I paid for the Showtime stream, the pay-per-view stream. So I watched it on my computer, on my iMac, and they exaggerated it. And, I kind of believed in, and they brainwashed people into believing that Jermall Charlo was badly hurt. But when I watched it again, he looked like he got hit with a good shot, and he finished the round strong. So that wasn't even a guaranteed Derevyanchenko round. In fact, I gave Derevyanchenko very few rounds, probably 2 rounds, 3 rounds being generous. So once again, how could Paulie Malgnaggi have kept his job if he's outright putting lies out in public statements about Eastern Europeans that are the dominant species? Then why didn't Derevyanchenko, using that logic from Paulie Malgnaggi, then how come Derevyanchenko's eyes look like a jack-o'-lantern? How come he lost virtually every round and got dominated by an African-American fighter? Let Paulie Malgnaggi say, he says it is no longer the time of the African-American fighters. They've had their segment in history. So, there's a clear conflict of interest when we're talking about Showtime and CBS as a brand and the integrity when you have someone like Paulie Malgnaggi with these radical viewpoints. That, like I said, if you were spitting gems and what you were saying was true, then I don't think people would be bothered. But clearly what Paulie Malgnaggi has stated was not true. He says, last time I checked, all the best fighters were white and the Eastern Europeans are taking over. Ironically enough, as of recording this video, it's fight week for Lomachenko, another Eastern European fighter from Ukraine, versus Teofimo. So we have to see how that plays out. Lomachenko has received a lot of press, a lot of hype, and we'll see how he does with the American style like Teofimo. But back to Paulie Malgnaggi's comments, they weren't true. They never were true. And you got to give us examples of what you're referring to. Again, as I keep saying, there's no wonder Paulie got fired when you're putting stuff out there in the public. And when you look back at it, Andre Ward beat Kovalev. The first fight was close and tight. He rematched him, immediate rematch, beat him even more convincingly, stopped him. That's a black fighter versus a guy from Russia, right? We've seen Terrence Crawford when he fought a Ukrainian fighter in Victor Postal. And he fought Mean Machine, who I believe is from Lithuania, and he stopped both of them. So once again, what is Paulie Malgnaggi referring to? Who is the fighter that got dominated? Like I said, let Paulie tell it. Charlo-Derevyanchenko should have dominated against Jermall Charlo, and that was the furthest thing from the truth. So for the people who had questions when it happened in real time, I'm just making this follow-up video, and we'll see what happens in the Teofimo versus Lomachenko fight. But this is just more proof that you got to be careful, meticulous, and calculated about what you put out there, especially with sensitive topics like race and gender and things like that. And most importantly, especially when they're not true. Let me know how I did in this video. Drop your thoughts in the comment section. If you love what I'm doing, smash the like button. As always, hate, comment, and subscribe. Till next video is Ego, signing off.
So if you enjoyed this video and want more content like this on the channel, you can show your appreciation by going to the PayPal donate button or the YouTube support button, and you can donate any amount that you feel is equivalent to the value of this video. Much more to come. Thank you guys for your support. Boxingego, the future of boxing.